Yeah, useless jargon. I feel like that's like a personal quest I'm on at the moment. Yeah, there's so much jargon out there at the moment. And I think uh, my background has been in the agile world for the last 10 years, and it's just become overly jargonized. And I think that the idea of product and platform is really interesting, and I didn't expect to come to the conclusions that I have done whilst exploring it. So the talk today is about product and platform, and really the choice that you have around the labels that you choose to use. And really, if I just distill these things down to labels, I'm doing them a huge disservice because there's a lot to it. And then what I'm going to try and do in half an hour or so, 'cause I don't want to leave room for a bit of Q&A, if that's going to be possible, is to get through my thoughts and feelings on platform and product. And I want you to challenge me wherever possible on what am I thinking, because I've learned a lot from going through this. So I wanted to start off with an explanation into, like, why do labels matter? Why do we care so much about the labels that we use when we're talking about product and platform and Scrum and sprints and product owners, etc.? And for me, it's because the labels that we choose to use, the language that we put on things, infer the way that we react to situations, and infer the end up really determining the actions that we quite often take. So I'm a big fan of having a shared language and a shared meaning. I think it helps understanding. And I think that at times when we say that let's not get caught up in semantics, I think we should get caught up in the meanings of words at times. So I think labels do matter, even and when they become jargon, I think they maybe matter less, but they do matter because when we see something, so what we're seeing here is the ladder of inference. We see something, we assess a pool of available data, and we pick the bits that have meaning to us. We use our assumptions, our conclusions, what's happened to us in the past, and then they kick off our beliefs and some actions. So if we think that product is something which is very, very narrow, anything can be a product, a specification is a product, a technical component is a product, and we then build our organization and we behave like they are products, then we end up with a lot of waste and a lot of inefficiency. If we think that platforms are the answer to everything in large organizations, and everything should be a platform, we should have identity as a platform and data as a platform, and UI as a platform, etc., then we can fall into traps in there as well. So the ladder of inference really helps us in our lives. But when we're talking about things like product and platform, we have to be really careful because the words mean different things to different people. They kick off certain reactions in people and lead organizations down various different paths depending upon their understanding of these words. So my belief is that if in an organization we can align our language and our actions, and they are both aligned, then our beliefs can be aligned. And if we can align our beliefs, we can shift our culture. So I'm talking about all of this because platform and product are perhaps used incorrectly at times, or used in less effective ways than they could be. And I want us to bear in mind as I go through this talk that what I want people to do is create a definition of these words that is useful in their context for them at that time, so that they can shift and align their culture over time to those useful definitions of these words. So first of all, when I drawing inspiration from a friend of mine called Buzz Vodder, he's I've started one of his talks with a bit of research that he did. So I tried to kind of follow in that vein somewhat. And I wanted to look at different definitions of product and what are some companies, some organizations, how do they define the word product? What does it mean? Now, Aha, popular platform, describes a product as this. It's something that you sell to serve a customer's need or want. And in the Oxford Dictionary, they say an article or substance that is manufactured for a final sale. So these are quite similar. We're talking about a product being something that we can sell that serves or meets a customer's need or want. And that's great. And what I love about this definition Is it aligns to how I feel about a product? It's something that we sell to a customer. Now, I would like to get a bit more specific on that, and we'll get there shortly. But I quite like this definition. I thought it was useful. If I'm an organization and I'm trying to define what my products are, then I can use this as a good starting point. I can say, well, I can sell this to this customer. So that is a product. Brilliant. I'm getting value from it. It's solving a need. It's changing their behaviors in some way. Now, Gartner, on the Gartner encyclopedia, I think they called it, um, went for a very verbose explanation of what a product is. And it says a product may just be software or data, like it's an inconsequential thing. I think this explanation was maybe from a few years back. And it also says that, or it may be a platform. And it says here, although product, and this is a bit I found very interesting when trying to draw a line between product and platform and which would be useful and where and other differences between them really. Is it says principally they serve external customers. Software organizations can also apply a product model to any collection of business capabilities delivered in a coherent value stream to internal customers. So this is implying that a product may be a platform, and it's also implying that a product can serve external customers, but a product can also serve internal customers. And for me, this explanation then is really conflating two separate things, I think. I think that it is taking something which is a bona fide product which we can go and sell to someone to moving that into an internal situation and saying, well, let's develop an internal product which we're then going to give to people. And I think that there are limitations to how much we can see other parts of the organization as our customers in the truest sense. But I'll elaborate on that as we go through. Product plan says anything a business anything a business sells that solves a market problem or addresses a customer's need or desire. Again, solid explanation. Solid explanation. And I quite enjoy these explanations, but they were, I would argue, maybe too broad. I like things to be a bit more specific. So I think the last definition that I'll share, or last view on it, is what comes from large scale Scrum. Now, bear in mind, large scale Scrum is Scrum with multiple teams, and it is optimized to maintain keeping the rules and principles of Scrum at scale. And it says that, and I really like this. The definition of product is really obvious, and one of the most important decisions you'll make. Okay, and this is where it's important because I think what follows next is what lots of organizations have embraced through their choice of framework or choice of approach, is that they say that if we will define the level and size of the product backlog, so how big will our product backlog be and what level will it be pitched at? Will it just be technical tasks pitched to an internal customer who are receiving technical information? Or will it be a list of items that are valuable from the customer's perspective, things that we can actually go out and sell and that we can prioritize against each other? Okay. It also means, are we going to have lots of very small siloed product backlogs, or can we have a much larger, much more holistic product backlog? How we define product from the way that Les describes it then is quite important, because then importantly, it also determines who our end customers are. And arguably end customers are the people who are actually choosing to pay for it, right, with their own cash, which they have generated themselves, I would argue, to draw a delineation between the perhaps internal and external customers. And who is a suitable product owner? So for me, this begins then to challenge us a little bit more and begin to ask the question, is our product something which is going to serve the right end customers? Is our product going to result in us having a product backlog, or at least a collection of things which serve that end customer directly? And I find this then much more challenging and arguably much more interesting. And which description you choose, what you get on board with, whichever framework or approach you want to embrace, you should always ask yourself the question, what would you find useful? Right? from looking at these definitions, from understanding, okay, so how are we going to define our product? What is going to be it? Who are the end customers? What do we want to prioritize against each other? Do we want to focus on the end customer and get teams working on real features and delivering real value? Or are we happy to have them work on smaller technical items which don't immediately bring any value to an end customer? So what I find useful then, and these are questions that I've used and some new questions that I've evolved since kind of researching this topic in particular. These are questions that I always ask myself and organizations to help them discover what is a useful model of product for them. So first of all, do we want teams to feel responsible for creating something that customers are willing to pay for? If we want to do that, if we want to have the teams feeling responsible for the creation of something customers are willing to pay for, then we need to give them ownership of whole features. We need to minimize the dependencies that team have on other teams. Ideally, we want to get those teams close to the customers. So if we want to achieve this, we don't want to take those end customer valuable items and break them down in any way. We want to try our utmost to keep them whole and our utmost to give them to teams. Do we want features with the best value probability at the top of all lists? From a product management, from a product ownership perspective, do we want to make sure that at the top of our lists, we have the items which we're able to say we believe are probably the most valuable? And if we define our products in a very narrow fashion, we lose sight of that. If we define our products which don't keep those items in with the end customer, the person who's actually going to pay for it in mind, then we find it very difficult to prioritize things together. So how we then use the word product and define our products internally can drive some of this. Because if we say a product is a database, and only a database, or a product is an API, and the end customer isn't willing to pay for those, then how can we easily ensure that we're going to have those items at the correct items at the top of the list? And interestingly, right, and this is something I found out recently, is that there is research that shows that teams that are close to the customer are more likely to improve their performance. So if we want teams to be able to talk to users, we need to give the team something which means something to the user. And if we can put those teams close to the users, then the data suggests that those teams will see bigger increases in their performance, in their ability to create and deliver value. If we don't use the word product correctly, if we have our products too narrow, if we have too many products, then we limit the opportunity for teams to talk to users. If we then decide, because it's getting so complex, and let's say we have defined very small little niche products which are technically focused, and we've created dependencies between many backlogs, and we're having to employ extra people to bring together all these disparate parts, so that it actually comes back into something that we can actually show to the customer and have a conversation with them about, then I would argue that if we want to really achieve what we're seeing on the screen now, then the way that we are talking about product or seeing product in our organization isn't useful. So in short, if we want teams who have a high value delivery capability, coupled with the ability to always find high value hypotheses to gamble on creating, then we need to use the word product in its broadest way possible. We need to view our products as including as many different pieces as we can do. So what I'm saying is, from a product perspective, and I'll get to platform in a second and we'll draw some comparisons. In my opinion, from what I've looked at, from my experience, a product should in some way change the behavior of an end user or customer in a way they find useful. And if it's done well, in such a way that the customer doesn't even notice. Okay, so we're talking end customer, people using their own money to pay for something, or an organization using their own money to pay for something, which they believe is going to give them a change in their or their organization's behavior, which they find valuable. A product should also be able to give the end users or customers something that solves that problem for them or meets a need via something they cannot create for themselves. So if I could make my own phone, if I could make my own TV, if I could make my own Nintendo Switch or PS5, then I would do that rather than buying it. if it was easy, but it isn't. And the great thing about these complex products is that they put it together really well. And I'm willing to pay money for that because I can't do it myself. So for a product to be really successful, it has to be something that someone's looking at saying, well, I can't do that for myself. So if you take what I would say isn't a product, is if you're working internally and you're developing something for another for another part of the organization that could develop it themselves, and then they look at it and say, well, no, I can do that, and I'm going to do that. I don't have to use your product. Then they will do. They won't buy your product. I would also say that a product should include as many pieces of stuff, like components, technical components or otherwise, as is currently practical, that are required for it to be sold. So I don't want a product which doesn't include enough of the technical components to have enough breadth, but it means that what we produce we can't actually sell. I want most of the things that we produce to be able to be sold when we desire, not because we're waiting for something to be added to it, because we're waiting on a different product somewhere else in the organization to finish their work. Now, there are limits to all of this. Right? I used the word practical in the previous slide. Just what is practical and what you can practically do that is useful. Right? There are limits. At times, you won't be able to use product in this very broad way. So you will require organizational change or technical change or other regulatory change, perhaps. So I think that you figure out what's useful for you and you have a goal to where you want to get to. And for me, this is what product is all about. This is how we can product cannot be such useless jargon in such a way that we have 100 different products of 100 different people owning the products and various other bureaucracy and management and stuff around it to shepherd all together. I think we could probably reduce the bureaucracy if we changed our mental model of what a product is within an organization. But then we hit upon an interesting thing is that sure we can have this broad idea of a product, but in big organizations where things are very complex, where you have regulations and laws to deal with and which will change frequently, um, can you have a product which can keep up with all of that? Can you have teams own whole features if they then have to deal with an identity system with laws governing it, if they have to deal with some kind of compliance, if they have to deal with audit needs from a regulator or from a government? Right? Can they be expected to do all of that stuff whilst delivering the features? Right? That's a big ask, and it's one that I found when working in large organisations has rarely been the case. I would have loved it if it was the case. I've rarely seen that be the case. And so then what I've seen in organizations and what I've found from a lot of my research is that a platform is a really interesting word. And it's a word that's used perhaps too much. And it's a word that is used to sometimes avoid people taking that broad product view. And where I came to on this is actually in large organizations where there is a lot of complexity with a diverse business, who maybe have lots of reasonably broad products internally, platforms can offer a huge amount of benefit. So the way that I define the platform is something that serves a broad set of users by enabling other things, like real products or products, to be built on them, using them. I mean, the Oxford Dictionary, rather unsurprisingly, calls a product a raised level surface on which peoples and things can stand. And I like that as a mental image of what we're doing in an organization to deal with some of the stuff, some of the organizational complexity or complexity in the market. We're building something that our products can stand on. Now, this person, Evan Botcher, works for ThoughtWorks, I believe. When I was doing my research onto what is a platform, I didn't find a huge amount of information. I mean, if you know, or a huge amount of definition, if you know of some, please pop it in the chat, let me know, grab me on LinkedIn, whatever. I'd love to see some more definition because I haven't finished my research into all of this yet. But he described digital platform as a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support, which can be arranged as a compelling internal product. Again, mixing up the words a little bit here. But I like this because actually a lot of what he's talking about here is what I've seen work well in organizations. And from the research I've done, it's what works well in number of other organizations as well. How can a platform, a digital platform, provide a foundation of stuff which is beneficial for other people to use, which takes some of their pain away? So the way that I rationalize this, actually, that when you introduce a platform, you're introducing new constraints for people. You are taking away some of the autonomy of the teams, perhaps, or taking away some of the autonomy of the products to make certain decisions. However, these constraints, much like a crevice here, you see this person climbing up, they do constrain us as to where we can go, but we can still move forward. So the way that I saw this is actually the constraints that are laid down by a platform which serves the creation of products, either within your organization or within an external organization, such as Twitter as a platform, need to enable adoption through autonomy. A platform needs to be able to pitch itself and use certain techniques so that people are able to be autonomous still, and they adopt the platform because it saves them heartache and pain. What we don't want is avoidance. We don't want people to avoid the platform because they see it as too controlling. And this is a really delicate balance that any platform has to take on. And these are the types of, I would argue, this is a seed for them, the real difference between platform and product. Because with a platform, you're putting in place a certain level of control to give people freedom. I mean, some of the successful stories I've heard of platforms, I think it was the New York Times, there was a great podcast from their platform management lady whose name escapes me. And she was explaining how, because they deal with a lot of the rules and regulations and they make sure that people are still compliant, and they manage things like payments, and they manage things like identity, and they manage things like compliance, but actually people can come and consume what they produce and use it. And then that gives those teams and those other products freedom to focus on the things that people are perhaps more willing to pay for. We all expect to be able to log into something. We're not willing to, we're not going to pay extra. Oh, they allow me to log in, I'll pay extra for that. We just expect it. They no longer delight us. They're just things that we expect. So with a platform, you put in place control to enable freedom. Okay? A slightly different mindset to a product, because you are looking to control things. You standardize lots of the basic stuff which people would expect, to leave room for teams to go and innovate over and above that. You're providing those constraints. You can, for you as a platform, you may have so much to do that your time to market increases. And for you as a platform, delivering those things may mean it feels that you're going quite slow, and maybe it's taking you longer than you'd like to get things out. But what this means is that you get to reduce the time to market for everybody else. And for the platform manager, and this is what I find fascinating, and I'd love to have some product managers on this topic because I didn't get a chance to interview as many as I would have liked, is that as a platform manager, you show leadership from showing new and better ways, from standardization, through putting in some constraints to enable people to focus on building the stuff that's going to add value to the end customer. But as a consequence, and because you're going to be dealing with so many different rules and external regulators, the bigger macro environment, and internal people trying to say, well, what do we fit on? What are we going to do next? Whose need do we service first? How do we make sure that we keep a good level of technical excellency without cutting corners because the demand is so high? There's a good amount of diplomacy. And, having looked at the definition of diplomacy, it's being sensitive and tactful. And I think this is a lovely tension to keep from a platform manager, this leadership and diplomacy, because it's very hard because you're trying to serve such an incredibly broad, diverse user base. And the interesting then point, and one of the biggest distinctions that I discovered when exploring this topic more, is that platforms tend to serve the middle users. The middle users being internal departments, engineering, it could be product management, it could be marketing, sales, compliance, it could be HR. They're providing service to these internal areas, the middle users, not the end user, who are the people who are ultimately buying the product that that platform is standing on, but the middle users, the important people who have to create that product, the people who we are giving that freedom to because we are doing a lot of the stuff which historically maybe had been done independently and created a huge headache when it came to keeping up with a new regulation or understanding where our data was or making the most of basically eradicating duplication, which is what a platform can do. A good platform can eradicate duplication. If we don't have platforms in those situations, sometimes a diversity of user base of needs can lead to a huge sprawling mass of features across many different products, which we have very little visibility of. So yes, the middle users, not the end user. This is someone who sits in the middle and uses the platform to enable their product to do something new and different. And when I think back to my time in many organizations, I've seen some successful platforms go into place where the people who were in the middle embraced these platforms because it made their lives easier. The platforms that I have rarely seen work, interestingly, and maybe my knowledge is a bit outdated, but when it came to seeing data as a platform and trying to homogenize and bring all of our data together, I'd rarely seen that bring any of the espoused value that their business case was based upon. So then the interesting thing for a platform manager is actually we begin to flip this, and this is no longer about, from a product management perspective, this one-tier discovery. Let's engage with our markets and our users and understand what's happening and make product gambles based upon that information. Actually, for a platform manager, there's a two-tier discovery because you have to understand at some level what's happening with the end users, our new customers, new markets, what's happening in the broader environment, what's happening, how much do people care about sustainability? Hopefully a lot. But as well as doing that, we then also have to do discovery on these middle users as well, product managers, engineering teams, sales, compliance, DevOps, SREs. So we have to take both of these into account. And the way that we then approach our platform development then becomes much more difficult and much more nuanced. And which then means that, we end up, I love this quote, you can please some of the people all of the time. You can please all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all of the time. And for me, I think when I look back at the platforms that I was engaged with and the platforms that I was trying to use, I think this was a very true statement. Because all of these opposites in the platform world provide tension. And to maintain this tension, not ignore the tension, not go for one or the other, but to maintain the tension and exploit the tension, to make decisions and drive things forward, to use that tension to create a valid business case and a value proposition for what you're trying to do is critical. And from a platform manager, I find that this is a different mindset, perhaps, to that of a product manager for the reasons that I've articulated. So when I think of what a platform should do, I think that a platform should be able to give people what they want quicker, with less need to coordinate with the rest of the organization than it would take to do it themselves. If they can do it quicker and it's less painful, generally speaking, an organization will do that. I say an organization. If we are consuming a platform from another organization, there's some SaaS solution somewhere, and we are consuming that, then we're only going to consume that if it's quicker, cheaper, meets enough of our needs, and it takes some of our pain away. Because we know if we're going to do that internally, then we're going to have to coordinate with so many people to try and bring that platform together. It makes it simpler just to get everyone to align to this set. If we're developing an internal platform for internal products, if I keep on the identity track, the idea of identity and access management, whoever uses single sign-on, that type of thing. If people can create their own method of authentication simpler, and they don't have to then liaise with the rest of the organization in order to do that, then they will do. So a platform has to be able to give people what they want quicker and have less coordination and require less coordination. A platform and the services within it should be narrowly focused, service-specific need. Whereas products may be broad and cover many, many different features on a broad range of feature sets. platforms should be reasonably focused in what they provide to people. A platform should provide autonomy and self-service as much as possible for those that want to use it. So that you don't have to worry about onboarding, about people accessing it. It's there, people can consume it. And if that's the case, that's more enticing. No one wants to go through sign-offs and stage gates and the rigmarole of getting something approved just to have us, to access a small part or a large part of something. So that autonomy and self-service is key. And importantly, and I think this is very, very relevant in large regulated industries, that actually it should make life easier for people by ensuring that you've got perpetual compliance with the laws, rules, and regulations that will be happening. So that if GDPR comes about and everyone's just consuming their data from a platform, and there's a simple way to make the updates to make sure there is compliance, then brilliant. If we have a big rule change, a new regulation comes in which says we can't store certain information or we have to have people access in a certain way, then let's do that. I think open banking, for those of you familiar with something called open banking, the way that organizations approach that as a platform was fantastic. So open banking is the service which allows third-party organizations who maybe aren't regulated with the FCA, ultimately, I think that's the goal, to obtain information from your bank accounts and to analyze that and use that for whatever purpose you allow them to. Now, if the rules and for laws change on open banking, lots of the organizations just go and they update their platform, and then anyone using that will be compliant. Rather than having each and every different group within, say, a large bank go ahead and make their own APIs, it would be a nightmare. It would be impossible to maintain. And a platform should be really well documented. If you want people to engage with it, it has to be well documented. And interestingly, then, you can use product management principles. I would say that some are more applicable than others. So, how similar can platform management be to product management? Well, I think there is still strategy involved. There is still a vision involved. But I think that where it falls short, perhaps, is road mapping. One of the things I found in my research is that people who manage large platforms are saying that they may have a broad roadmap. For example, Twitter has a roadmap which you can access for the Twitter platform, but they can't go into a lot of detail on that because things change so often and they have so many different users and needs. You know, so road mapping perhaps less relevant in some instances of platform management. However, the user discovery, understanding the users and applying some of that, and thinking about the UX of the platform you're providing, you know, that has many similarities of product management and they're great transferable skills. But principally, whilst there is a lot shared, there's a lot of overlap. There's also significant difference on the periphery, which will mean that some things aren't quite as applicable. So if you go back to my articulation of how Les kind of described the product and saying, it's so important, and Les will say, have a nice broad product. Now, if a platform is a product dependency and we want teams to own a whole feature, then if we create a platform, we're creating a dependency. And many would argue then that if you're striving to have, what I say is feature teams is a nice bit of a nice buzzword that people use, and many organizations try and achieve that. By definition, a feature team should be able to work on any feature over time and not have any dependencies. If you introduce a platform, you create a dependency. Thus, at least from a pure definitional perspective, you will no longer have a feature team. So what is stopping the feature teams building and maintaining it? And a lot of that comes down to it's just too much work and it's too hard. And many organizations are just finding their feet. As I say, he says, looking at his feet with feature teams, and loading up this extra stuff on top of the feature team's work is too much. So I believe that in large organizations that have had an uncontrolled evolution of their products and their platforms, whose organizational structure and their software architecture, their product architecture is quite complex, that actually having feature teams own some of the platform work or all the platform work probably is a goal for the future. And that abstracting it into some kind of platform and making it easy for the feature teams to get moving and get going and work on the value delivery capability is probably the lesser of the two evils. I would prefer to have that work taken away from them, than have them have that work, but be dependent upon another team for something critical, which couldn't be then stripped out as a platform. So I'd love to know whether you agree. If we've got time for Q&A in a little while, then I'd love to know. Or you can get me on LinkedIn. I hope you don't agree. I've still got a lot to learn on this topic. There's still much more research I'd like to do. But to wrap up, some questions for you. Chrome. Is Chrome a product or a platform? I remember the days, shows my age, when it used to be a browser. But now, is it a product or a platform? Well, I would argue that Chrome is a platform, because Chrome is increasingly used in many different situations. So if you look at this Samsung Chromebook here, I would argue that is a product. But there are many different versions of Chromebooks. Many different manufacturers make them. Chrome will no doubt at some point play a larger part in powering mobile devices. It is present in many other industries, in booths, in exhibitions. For powering some of the, it's a great platform. You've got Chrome, the base of it being embedded in like Google TV and etc. So Chrome is the platform, and people take that platform and they make products they can sell. It's the same as iOS. iOS is a platform. There are many different products, such as the iPhone, which use iOS. The iPhone is the product. iOS is the platform that enables that product to sing. So iOS is updated more frequently than the iPhone. So the iOS can be rolling as a platform, offer these services out. All these different devices can then hook into it, can use it, and they remain up to date. It makes it a lot easier. You can say that the whole product and platform idea is about breaking that hard link that used to exist between the two. Windows, another great example of a platform. You don't have to buy a special machine made by Microsoft to run Windows. You have a vast choice of machines that you can build yourself or buy, which will run Windows pretty seamlessly. So the PCs that people sell, that people make, they're the product, with all different bits from all over the various different components, and the Windows is the platform that they get delivered on. So this is me. I hope you've enjoyed the talk. I've enjoyed talking about it. It's something I've been quite passionate about. To answer the question, product or platform? Platform, if there are middle users and you want to make life for the internal users or another company easier, something they can build their product on. Product, if it's something that's selling to an actual end user who's going to change their behaviors in some way. Platforms have maybe many narrow focuses. Products may be more broad. So I talk about all this on my Certified Less Practitioner course. Here's the advert. I exit through the gift shop. So get in touch, come on to my Certified Less Practitioner course, and I talk about how to help people through difficult transitions from going to project to product to platform in my Agile coaching course. So get in touch with me, sign up to my mailing list. It would be great to hear from some of you. I can see that we have a question, which is a good question. And I'm just going to change my camera so that I can look at you. So the question was, what role do projects have? And I'll be brief, Alan, because I know that I'm pretty much at time. Alan, do you want to read it, Alan? I can take it back.
You've read it. Thanks, Ben.
I know.
Yeah, I'll just sit back. I'll enjoy my cup of tea.
Alan, what role do projects have? Projects have their place. Don't get me wrong. I've got a video coming out on this in a week or two, actually. Let me just see if I can find it. So projects are great if you are able to control the way that if you're able to control everything. If it isn't a complex environment, if things are simple, then you can fix the outcome of the scope, and you can fix the time, and you can fix the people that will be working on it. But the problem is when you start to fix those things in a complex environment, such as product development, when you are dependent upon users and other people to feed you in ideas and for them to see it and give it back to you, that projects kind of fall short, and projects are very short-term focused. So you work on a project, do the project, and you're done. You move on to the next thing, which can be great in some instances. But I would say that the way that things have evolved, like traditional project management of trying to fix things and monitor things and control things, is it's kind of increasingly limited. So I think that products and platforms can have projects, but I think that projects should be used least out of the three. Is my personal opinion.
Excellent. We have another question, which is, we all know typically how a product backlog would evolve and elaborate. What would be the differences between a product backlog and a uh, a platform backlog?
I would say a platform backlog is going to be much. I would, from what I don't, probably much more technically focused. It's going to be having very technical based deliveries focused on the middle users. That if you were to show a platform backlog item to somebody who is an end user who is going to consume the product that platform was built on, they would look at it and say, like, oh, why would I pay for that? I don't really understand that. A product backlog should consist of items where you can show it to the person who's going to be paying for it, and they're going to look at that and say, yeah, I can understand that. I would pay for that, or I would pay for that when it's part of this bigger thing. So platform backlogs are going to be more technically focused. I would guess they are going to be a lot more. Hold on a second. A platform backlog could well be a lot larger than a product backlog. That a platform backlog may well be open to lots of internal users, whereas a product backlog maybe not so much. So really, for me, it's about the customer. It's that whole middle user, end user thing. Platform backlog service the middle user, product backlog service the end user. So, here's a good one.
Yeah, good. Sorry, I know my camera's just dropped, but yeah. So this one is. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on offering a platform to enable extensibility by the middle user, while also offering a base product or reference product using that platform? Great question.
Yeah, I know, it's a nice one.
Mm.
And some of the research I did, I found it fascinating, but I can't remember who was it? There's a really humble guy. I don't think it was the guy from Pendio. No, it was, I think. So they say that when you have a successful product and it grows like exponentially, and then you look at that product and say, wow, okay, we can offer out a platform here as well, like Twitter or Facebook. Then what the people were saying was actually that route is reasonably well trodden and easier than saying, actually, let's go out there and make a platform. Because when you start off as an organization, this is where you're probably, this is more relevant kind of when you're making a platform for other companies to go and stand upon, that actually trying to make that platform initially can be really hard work. And it was the CEO of Pendio who I think he was saying, that he just had lots of ideas and they were quite fortunate that they were able to keep going and build a solid platform built upon like three main pillars. I think he was saying to what they do right now. But I think it's I think it's a really nice idea. I think that by having that base product or reference product, to coin a phrase, it's eating your own dog food. That internally, but then I would say that platform, the interesting challenge that provides is how objectively can you treat your internal user versus by the person who's within your organization versus the people outside your organization. How do you balance that off? Because then internal politics come into place. And do you end up doing things for the base or reference product over doing things for the market? So I think that, again, it's that it adds to the two-tier discovery thing. I think platform management gets really, really tough I think at that point, really rewarding, and I think this is why that's that leadership and diplomacy point. But I think it's a nice idea, and it sets a good example. I think as a platform, it's too easy to get wrapped up in your own. It's too easy to get wrapped up in it without kind of realizing and lose sight of really what you're trying to achieve. So having something close by, which is a reference for it, I think is a really nice idea.
And interestingly, you see a lot of what would be traditional platform teams who've worked the same way for 10 years more. And they're transitioning to a more agile way of working and trying to productize the platform. And it comes with, I guess, lots of ups and downs. But what would your recommendations be for that typical scenario where you have a long-lived platform team who are now trying to become more like a product team, but understanding that they are a platform, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think understand and embrace the fact that you're a dependency.
Mm.
I think that's a large part of it. I think too often that when people start looking at agile, they disregard the severity or criticality of the dependency they have on each other, and we don't employ lots of maybe the more traditional approaches to managing those dependencies that we could do. So I think one is to understand the dependencies and find ways to embrace it. The obvious one is to keep clear lines of communication, make sure you're talking, and pick the right product management techniques. I think kind of taking your platform and saying this is a product and doing a really commercial view on it, I think creates a certain myopia. I think that then we try and turn the platform into something that maybe it isn't. And I think there's a huge amount of value from really kind of saying there are distinct differences from this, and living with those and evolving from that point, really. I mean, the one thing I did mention in the talk was actually a technical excellence is absolutely critical for a platform. People won't use your platform if it isn't reliable. People may continue to use your product if it doesn't work every now and again, but your platform is probably going to form part of the critical infrastructure, and you can't avoid, and so as a consequence, by wanting to maintain that technical excellence, it may mean you go a bit slower. And I think there's a lesson there to not just kind of plow forward, to actually try and take some time and to make sure he's doing something that's sort of a perpetual quality.
Excellent. So Ben, thank you. That was super interesting. It's something that I'm living right now,
Really?
which is
Well,
platform and product. So,
I'm going to interview you then at some point, Alan.
oh
Get in
yes,
touch.
please do. It was very interesting for me, and I'm sure for everybody else. So look, thank you for your time, and we hope to see you later on in the conference. And yeah, and thanks everyone for your questions. That was super. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye
See
bye.
you around. Bye bye.